welcome. Before we introduce the content for today, we just want to start with a land acknowledgement. So we're joining from many different places, but us as an organizing team are based in so-called Vancouver on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Coast Salish peoples, the indigenous peoples of this land, specifically the Squamish, Stalo, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And we encourage us to start from a place of gratitude and just reflecting on the land where you live. So welcome, for the first webinar of our 4-part series. We are so excited to get started and to have so many folks joining and such excellent speakers for today. So our theme is Global Agricultural Data Governance, Lessons from International Initiatives. But our focus primarily is on a project that is based in British Columbia, with the University of British Columbia and the BC Agricultural Climate Action Research Network. And we're leading these 4 workshops as the kind of curriculum. So we really encourage you to join for all 4. And we have an excellent moderator here today that will bring these international conversations to a BC context. However, this is certainly not exclusion of anyone outside of BC. A lot of these topics are relevant across the globe. And so if you're joining from somewhere else, not to worry, you will still get lots out of the webinar. This project is led by Professor Hannah Whitman, the principal investigator for the project and the grant, Shauna McKinnon from BC ACARN, who you'll hear from momentarily, and myself. I'm a researcher and PhD candidate from the University of British Columbia, and we have a really excellent advisory group to help us with this outreach project, some of whom are speaking today. All right, to you, Shauna.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah Louise, for getting us started today and for the introduction to the project. So I'm Shauna McKinnon. I'm the coordinator for the BC Agricultural Climate Action Research Network. Some of you might be familiar with us, but if you're not, we formed in 2017 to foster collaboration among researchers, government, and producers to catalyze effective research-backed solutions, climate solutions for BC food producers. As a network that's focused on research collaboration, you can imagine that data sharing and data governance are topics that have come up many times. And, from how to make research data go back to producers in a way that's useful for them, to how to work together to build data sets that connect the often siloed work of different research projects or research labs. And because we're working in the climate change context, it's definitely not lost on us that as climate change intensifies, there's a need to better understand and track the changes that are taking place across agricultural landscapes, and a recognition that farmers need better information to guide their decision-making and their farm management practices, given that we're experiencing so much more highly variable and unpredictable weather conditions. So we're really excited to have the opportunity to partner with Hannah Whitman and Sarah Louise and UBC for this project. And I'm really excited to be launching this workshop series and this opportunity to bring together the global expertise on this topic. Because one thing I've noticed about these conversations when they've come up, we often get stalled. We have good intentions, but when it comes to figuring out how data governance frameworks can be developed to make sure that we can use data, but also protect and respect the rights of farmers, we get stuck. So really exciting to have this launching today. I'm just gonna give a couple notes on the flow of today. So we have 3 speakers who will be presenting, giving a short presentation. After each presentation, there'll be a short chance for questions, just a couple of questions. And then following the 3 speakers, there'll be a longer time for Q&A and discussion. While the speakers are presenting, I encourage you to use the Q&A box, which you'll find in your Zoom control panel. You can type your questions in there. Please type in the name of the speaker that you'd like to direct the question to. And you can also upvote questions. So if you see people's questions in there that you would like to see answered, give it a thumbs up. That'll move it up the queue. And then when we get to the Q&A, we'll ask those questions first. Also, as Sarah Louise already mentioned, we have a session moderator today, Greg Rekken, who is the team lead for mitigation and soil health from the BC Ministry of Agriculture and Food. We chose Greg to moderate the session today because he has some really interesting expertise for this conversation. So he's worked with agricultural producers in Southeast Asia, he's worked in the agri-tech industry, and he's now part of a team in the ministry that's working on soil health data. So part of his role today is bridging the conversation between the global experience and the Canadian British Columbian context. So welcome, Greg. I'm going to hand things over to you to introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Shauna. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. We're fortunate today to have three excellent speakers from across the globe who will share their insights about data governance in agriculture. First, we have Vineet Singh, is the VP of Products at Digital Green, an NGO with community-based projects in 12 countries in Asia and Africa. Vineet is building products and tools to solve problems of smallholder farms, including FarmStack and the data wallet that we will learn about today. He co-founded a drone manufacturing company and has over 15 years of experience in diverse tech startups across India. Second, we have Dr. Isabelle Piot-Lepetit, is a research director at the French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment, working on sustainability and digitization in food systems. She has 25 years of experience in research and consulting for governments in France and internationally. And finally, we have Luc Lapointe, is CEO and founder of the THEBC.lab. He is based in Colombia. Luc has worked as a consultant for 25 years, supporting not-for-profit organizations and governments in finance and international development. Currently, he is working on technical and data-related challenges with farmers and organizations in Colombia's cocoa sector. So we'll get started with the presentations from our esteemed panelists, starting off with Vineet Singh. It's my pleasure to begin with Vineet. Welcome, Vineet. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Thanks, Gregory, for welcome remarks. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Just 1 second. So today, as per the topic of the presentation that I thought of was talking about our learnings from data exchange pilots that we have been doing and what does it mean by farmer-centric governance. Before I delve deep into the topic, just a brief introduction about Digital Green. We are a global not-for-profit organization based out of San Francisco and offices in India, Kenya, Ethiopia. We are on a mission to create a world where farmers can use technology and data to build prosperous communities. In our journey so far, we have been very fortunate to be funded by leading donors like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UK FCDO, Walmart Foundation, and so on. And through these funders, donors, we have been able to create technology solutions and enter partnerships with government in various geographies, to name Ministry of Agriculture in Ethiopia, Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, and livelihood missions in states in India like Jivika and RYSS. And through these partnerships and initiatives, we have been able to reach 3.2 million small-scale producers, out of that 77% of them being women. And our flagship product, which is strengthening advisory or extension work of the government through video, has been able to realize up to 17% increase in farmer income and up to 47% increase in the yield. And it has been proven to be around 8x more effective than traditional extension. Our flagship product, which was in 2008 formulated by our co-founder and CEO, Mr. Rekken Gandhi, was basically aimed at solving the problem of the small-scale producers in India by creating a community-based video, which can be shown by the extension workers who are on contract with the government, and they can share it peer-to-peer about the practices that one farmer has done to another farmers. And over a period of time, as we supported and created these technology tools on advisory, one of the big question was, what exactly does data-driven agriculture mean for the farmers, and especially smallholder farmers for whom we work. In the process of providing services or the extension service, we were able to capture multitudes of data about what video farmers are watching. The videos are related to about which kind of practices, what is the benefit, and so on. The idea was, how can we leverage this data, which we helped collect for the government? It was a requirement from our partners as well, to create an exponentially more impact. And we started as a first principle to go back to the what is the perspective of a farmer? What does it mean by data for the farmer itself? And this is the typical farming activity. And farming at the core of it is a business activity that creates wealth or that sustains livelihood of people. And just like any business activity, it is subject to vagaries of market, policies, and even more so climate. Farmers have urgent needs. This lady here is going to sell around 20 to 30 kgs of produce, because that produce can get wasted. That's what the farmer needs. And what farmers get are very top-down services that are not contextual in nature. And that's where the role of data and technology comes into picture. And what we realized as a very basic thing was that data about farmers can be utilized to create awareness of various agriculture services. And the service provider itself can be made aware about the farmers. So data creates awareness. Digitization is necessary, and the increasing penetration of smartphones with smallholder farmers can help them get accessibility to these services. And collectivization of the farmers themselves in the form of formal or informal farmer groups helps them to get these services at an affordable manner. And with these sort of thoughts, we started doing our user research, various kind of pilots and trials. And there are a few things that we came to know. On the farmer side, it's only the farmer who knows what is being done on the farm. And what is the collecting of the data about the farmer is difficult. It's time consuming, it is error prone, it's also costly, especially for smallholder farmers. If you want to do at a scale of millions of farmers. And one of the big things was that the farmers trust the local community, people whom they know. And for any service provider, including government, whom we work very closely with, they want the data about the farmers in a certain format. And they want the data to be of good quality. And they want they want a trusted framework using which they can share or get this data itself. And with these broad requirements, we came up with the idea of creating a phygital kind of a model, which is kind of a word for physical plus digital, where there's a product plus also a service pack. So more of a human-centric design, where the information about the farmers that can be collected by a community person can be used by various service providers, including government, to benchmark productivity and to share new opportunities. And these opportunities that can be made available to the farmer through the same community persons can help them realize the value. And one of the core thing that we realized over a period of time was the farmer has to be at the center of the entire value creation. If the farmers see a value, they understand that this information about them can get them tangible benefits in terms of contextual advisories or contextual information or services at the right time, be it about market linkage, be it about insuring, be it about financial, or be it about input. That would be the real driver for this information to be shared across the ecosystem. And using that, we created one of the apps which is used by the local farmer organizations. And in this particular app, this is just a small GIF that I've created. The community person can go to the farmers and they can convene a group meeting, and they can collect information about the farmers in terms of what is the amount of inputs that they need in terms of seeds or saplings. And this entire application itself is totally customizable. So they can customize not only about their farmer organizations or their groups activity, they can also customize what kind of value chain they're dealing with. So if someone is dealing with coconuts, it would be about coconut. If someone is dealing with paddy, it could be about paddy. In some places, financial services are important. It can be customized. So this customizable app, which is used by the community persons, is then used by what we call as FarmStack, where the government organizations or the agriculture service provider, the companies, agri-tech companies, they can basically come and see what kind of data fields are there. They can see the sample data itself or synthetic data, and they can basically join and combine and create dump to create solutions for the farmers. And this is just another small GIF where the person is basically selecting what kind of that the information that is required is at the Kebele level. This is in Ethiopia, which is the village, and based on that we can then create the advisory which is specific to the fertilizer recommendation based on the location of the farm. And one of this example that we have recently tried out was also to create a smart bot on WhatsApp, with the entire idea that this entire user interface of collecting this information and distributing this information in the form of advisories should be done in a very intuitive manner. So Digital Green, which runs, Digital Green helps government to create a content library, which is about all the documents about best practices or the videos. And this information, and also combined with the consent of the farmer that is obtained, is combined to create a bot which can be accessed on this particular link, where a farmer can, or the FLW, which we call as the frontline worker, community person, video person, can go and the questions that are asked by the farmers can be posted there, and they can get the relevant contextual advisories related to that particular geography, that particular language, that particular seed varieties that we are talking about, from the entire information that is uploaded as from the government sources or the research organizations. Another of such pilot that we did recently, we culminated that was with the chili farmers in the state of AP in India, where the farmer level information is maintained by what we call as farmer producer cooperatives. And then with FarmStack, this data is then shared across different service providers, which includes Department of Horticulture for providing advisory, the chatbot that we have shown, the Agnex, another company which is providing a quality assaying service for the farmers, another company which provides the e-commerce platform for procuring the produce of the farmers or providing the inputs, and so on. And using this basically network, the farmer is able to get access to the services at a click of a button. And the way it happens is through a informed consent. So I just would love to play a small video. This video is in the local language, so I'll skim through this video itself. And idea here is to basically show this. So the community person goes to the farmer and shows this. There's a consent module that can be embedded inside any of these apps. So in this app itself, using icons and infographics, the information, the awareness is created for the farmers as to what information is being collected and if they want to share that particular information. And what we realize is that the farmer is interested in knowing not the data schema or the exact details. They're not interested in going through a lengthy legal document. What they want is what is the gist of this information. And using these icons, because of the low literacy level, they are able to understand that this is the phone number, this is the location, this is my name, or some details about myself, which can be shared across to different service providers who can then provide me various different services. So it can be shared to provide the market linkage, for providing the advisory, or providing the soil service. And then they are shown that they can basically give this consent, and they can also revoke this consent, and they can do it through a click of a button or through the SMS itself. So with this consent module, what we created, what we were able to do was create a kind of a layered innovation stack, as we call it, in an open DPG manner, where there are farmer organizations which operate with the farmer groups of frontline workers. These frontline workers interact with the farmers. They provide different services or value for the farmers as to better price for the inputs, or better price for the produce, because they can collectively buy the entire inputs. And these transactions and the services that are being generated, that are being offered, create the transactions in the form of data. And this information, which is then can be shared by a consortium or a partnership with the government, where as a multi-tenant architecture, the ownership of the data is retained by these farmer organizations. And essentially these farmer organizations and the farmer members hold the control of the data, that whom to share, what to share, and how to share, and how they can revoke. And this information is then made available through open APIs to different service providers, which can range from providing inputs to market linkage or finance. So with that, I would end the presentation. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Vineet. That was very interesting. I see one question in the Q&A. I'd like to, if anybody else has questions, please type them in the Q&A, and I'll start with the first one that we see here. So there's a question here, Vineet, regarding, according to you, what do you see as the role of government and state authorities in ensuring ethical implementation of data in agriculture?
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question and an important question. And as I speak, we are working with governments in 3 different geographies, in Ethiopia, Kenya, and state governments in India. One of the key concerns that they have, even with the advisory as well, is the authenticity of the service that is provided. That's one. Second is the government is keen on ensuring the rights of the subjects or the farmers themselves. So one of the very important thing is the consent. That is not just from the farmer's perspective, it's also from the policy perspective. The other important aspect, the major role that they want to play, is basically, as per them, the mandate is to enable the ecosystem to provide better services for the farmers. And in that, the role of running this data exchange network is something that that's that's the governments are very keen to, partner with and play that role. And for the ecosystem actors themselves, if they want to share this information, they need a trust anchor. And the trust anchor is basically government in a lot of places. Where and when they run the instance of FarmStack, they can publish the details, like what are the data policies that people need to abide by, and also the rules of engagement itself. Apart from that, there's an interesting aspect of government supporting a lot of these farmer organizations, a lot of these players, agriculture players who are not digitized to an extent that their data is in a certain way. So it in the FarmStack or these data exchange networks that are coming up, there's a very strong need for someone publishing all the data standards. And these data standards are again something that have to be maintained as an open, public good that can be used. So researchers, academia, and government, they all have a role to play in maintaining and sustaining this data exchange network.
Okay, thank you. We had a question. Can I just confirm, what are the name of the app that you're talking about here, just so others who want to go have a look at it can find it?
Sorry, Gregory?
The name of the tool, so the app that you've been talking about, is it called FarmStack or?
Yeah, so FarmStack is the data exchange where participants can publish and discover data and create data pipelines, basically automating that entire data flow. And the other is the data wallet, which we are rolling out with the farmer organizations. So these are the two different. One is a mobile app for the field workers to collect information about the farmers and get a consent, and based on that consent, enable them to exchange that information and avail services. The other is for that information to be exchanged and that consent to be implemented.
Okay, thank you. So it seems like there must be a high level of trust between producers and government. Can this work where producers wish to keep their data private?
Yes. So they're essentially and trust is something that is very, very strong requirement, depending on what use case we are talking about. Specifically, when you're talking about demographic level details of the farmers or financial details of the farmers. So there are different ways, to a certain extent, technology can provide that solution. So the FarmStack connectors themselves, there are different flavors. One is I can run the connectors and these pipelines on the infrastructure of that network enabler. So the government who is running that network, I can just go click and create a connector, just like your automation tools like Zapier and so on. The other could be that I am concerned about my data, so the connector can be run on my own instance. So it's like bring your own cloud. And one of the key aspects of the FarmStack connectors is about providing an authenticated kind of mechanism to enable exchange of data between one connector, which is a software artifact, and another connector directly, without any third party looking at that particular data. And then the third aspect is it allows you to build customized kind of logics, which can range from encrypting that entire data itself, or it could be about masking certain fields that are important. So these are different levels of trust that can be done. Essentially, the trade-off typically is trust versus convenience. If you want more trustworthy, you want more secure, that means there's a level of technical nitty-gritties that one has to understand, running the connector and so on and so forth. Versus if someone wants, and a lot of the information like advisory related is something that is non-personal, which can be, exchanged without requiring too much of technical implementation.
Okay. Thank you, Vineet. I know it's very late for you, so we really appreciate you coming and presenting to us today. I think we'll move on to our next presenter, Dr. Isabelle Piot-Lepetit. Welcome, Isabelle. You can go ahead and share your screen and present. I think you're muted still. Yeah.
Okay, I was muted. No, it's okay. So just to know if you see my screen, so I can start.
Yeah, I can see your screen here. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going today to share with you just a broad view of what is going on in the European Union about agricultural data governance policy. So I'm going to start by providing an historical perspective, because agricultural data governance is part of a broader strategy at the European level. So everything started in July 2014, when the European Commission published a communication on toward a thriving data-driven economy. This text was adopted in January 2015, and it described a set of actions that aim at accelerating innovation and productivity growth, and at the same time at increasing competitiveness in data across the whole European Union, but also on the global market. Then in April 2016, we have the General Data Protection Regulations that was launched, the GDPR, and with an entry into force in May 2018. And this GDPR is currently the European law on data protection and privacy, and it focuses on the processing of personal data and also on the free movement of data on the territory of the European Union. And it allows individuals control and enhance their right over their personal data. Then we have the January 2017, the European Commission published a new communication, Building a European Data Economy. There the communication look at proven and potential blockages to the free movement of data. And it also introduced options to remove unjustified or disproportionate data location restriction in the EU. And by exploring the barrier around access to and transfer to non-personal machine-generated data, the communication also introduced elements regarding data liability and issues related to the portability of non-personal data, interoperability, and data standards. Then in April 2018, a new communication from the European Commission on toward a common European data space. And here it's a package of measures that will push forward the creation of common data spaces in the European Union. And finally, the main element is February 2020, where the overall EU digital strategy is published and called A Europe Fit for the Digital Age. And it sets the agenda for the digitalization of the European Union, as well as the European strategy for data and element from the artificial intelligence strategy. Now, I'm going to focus more on the European data strategy. And here the aim is to create a single market for data, and that will ensure global competitiveness and as well data sovereignty in the European territory. And for that, the objective is to create a common data space. With the keeping in mind the fact that companies and individuals have control on their data. And so the main objective of this European data strategy is to allow data flow within the EU and across sectors. Also, it aims to provide high quality data so that innovation can be fostered. It must be in accordance with the European rules and values, and the rules for access and use of data has to be fair, practical, and clear. And there is also a request for a clear data governance mechanism that can be used to manage those common data spaces. So what are the various steps that allow us to build up this single European data market? Well, at first, we have this European data strategy from February 2020, and then a document from February 2022. It's a working document, but it explains how that common European data spaces will be designed. And right now, there is 10 data spaces that are under creation in various sectors, such as agriculture, health, manufacturing, energy, mobility, finance, public administration, to name just a few. And here it's the objective is to bring together data infrastructure as well as data governance framework so that data sharing can be implemented within the European Union, as well with data of high quality, with interoperability, both within and across sector, and also with the data governance that is compatible with the EU legislation. And in December 2022, there is also the Implementing Act on High-Value Datasets that have been adopted. It's the Directive on Open Data and Reuse of Public Sector Information. So here the objective is to make publicly funded information available publicly available, so they can be reused, they can be read by machine format, and they can be downloadable easily when possible. And after that, since then, the European Commission is working on a set of cross-sector legislative framework that are the Digital Market Act. So it entered into force in November 2022, but it's implementing starting this month. We have also the Data Governance Act, which entered into force in June 2022, but it's expected to be implemented in September. Then we also have the Digital Service Act that will be designed in beginning of 2024, and lastly the Data Act that is currently under discussion. So now I'm going to focus on those cross-sector legislative frameworks because they are very important. So they are all designed with at their core the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and they are complementing these regulations. So first, the Digital Market Act well, try to put an end to unfair practices by companies that act as gatekeepers in the online platform economy. So those gatekeepers are mainly digital platforms, providing important gateway between business user and consumer, with a position that grants them the power to act as a private rule maker, and by such to limit, to create some kind of bottlenecks in the digital market. So the Digital Market Act defined a series of obligations to be respected by those gatekeepers, so that unfairness can be reduced in the platform economy, online platform economy. We also have the Data Governance Act, which is a regulation that focuses on increasing trust in data sharing, and especially by setting up intermediation structures that are going to manage the sharing of personal and non-personal data. And for instance, they are going to manage consents. And the aim is also to facilitate the reuse of data that have been collected, and especially protected public data, such as business information that are confidential, or intellectual properties and things like that. Those data intermediation services are going to be certified, but when an organization practices data altruism, which is a sharing of data that can be useful in a common interest, the certification there is not mandatory. Then coming up very soon, we have the Data Service Act, which is going to rules the intermediaries' obligations and accountability across the EU single market. So the aim is to provide digital services across border within the European Union, but also to ensure a very high level of protection to all users living in the EU. And finally, the Data Act regulation, which is still under design, but has been presented in February 2022 in its first design. Here, the aim is to ensure a better distribution of value coming from the use of personal and non-personal data between participants in the data economy, and especially when the data come from connected objects and Internet of Things. And thus, by doing so, the Data Act try to let the control of our data to the provider of the data, and also to help them to receive reward for sharing their data in a fair and equitable way. So just to finish my presentation, I would like to share with you some kind of very specific initiative going on in the agricultural sector. So I'm not going to everything that is under development right now, but just a few for illustration purposes. So I would like to introduce you to AgData.hub, which is a European platform for agricultural data circulation exchanges. So it brings together public and private participants of the agricultural sectors, and they try to develop a shared and sovereign technological infrastructure, and their service offering are securing digital relationships with digital identity, centralization of farmers' consents, and also facilitating data exchanges as a trusted third party. There is also a European project under development right now that aims to pave the way to the first European data space for agriculture, so data agri-space. And the aim is to support and facilitate data sharing, processing, and analysis in a secure, trusted, transparent, and responsible manner. And AgData is part of this project as well. Another initiative that is still under development is a partnership on core agriculture of data. And here the aim is to enhance climate, environmental, and social economic sustainability and productivity of agriculture, and also at the same time to strengthen policy monitoring and evaluation capacities by exploring the potential of Earth and environmental observations, joining with the use of data coming from sensors and IoT, and everything all together in combination with data technologies. And the last illustration is Data for Food 2030. It's a European project funded by the Horizon Europe program, and it aimed at exploring the various multiple aspects of the data economy for food system. And here the data is not only analyzed like a new economic asset, but it's also looked at as a strategic good in the transition for sustainable food systems and to a more fair and inclusive society. And within this project, the data economy for food system will be defined. A mapping of this development will be provided, as well as performance, its performance, and also the impact it can have. And in order to create insight and develop new opportunities, as well as to support policymakers in the design of new policies. So here it is. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Isabelle. It's very interesting to see the depth that Europe has gone to come up with a data governance framework. I think due to time, we won't pause for Q&A questions right now. Isabelle, maybe you could answer some of the questions in the chat.
Okay.
And we'll move on to our final presenter, Luc Lapointe. He'll be drawing from his experience working with producers in Colombia. Welcome, Luc. You can go ahead.
Here's the microphone. No, thank you very much, Gregory. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I think we've got a share of the global perspective here this morning. So I want to make sure I present this initiative we're leading from Colombia in South America, but also in the perspective of my role as well in Canada. In Canada, we have what's called Capitals Hubs Canada, which is a chapter of the Capitals Coalition working on obtaining data on non-financial data, right? Those intangible data, so data coming from nature, from biodiversity, social, natural capital, all these are the source of data. So from one side, the Canadian side or the European side or the US side asking for more data, and now it's not, should you share your data? You'll have to share your data if you want to get to markets in different markets, if you're exporting even national market. And on the other side now, I think the perspective from smallholder farmers looking at one sector, but we're also working with the other sectors, but looking at the cocoa or cacao sector in Colombia, and the increasing demand for data without any rules of engagement on how this data is being asked for. What will it be used for? Are we working on the cause or the because when it comes to the data? So I'm providing here this schematic on looking at the sector perspective, and you're looking from left to right of a living income, and this is what you want to obtain from the farmers. and all the factors that quite often, I mean, I like the presentation for Vineet from India. And this is what we see as well, right? Where most of the focus normally for the farmer is around the farmer. It is land and whatever comes out of the crops that will come out of the farm. But there's just so much other data that makes, and this is why the cause and because, right, of the data that you're collecting, is it being useful, or is it serving for any means? And the increasing demands for the small farmers here in the mountains of Colombia, or it doesn't matter in emerging economies right now, where you'll be asked about biodiversity, you'll be asked about climate change, you'll be asked about soil health, you'll be asked about modern slavery. So you've got this poor campesinos, the smallholder farmers, right, having to deal with so many different apps, one that focuses on biodiversity, the other one is geospatial data, and the other one coming from the countries. And there's no discussion, right? I mean, from a country's perspective, from an emerging market perspective, in telling the EU or telling Canada or the G7 country, I'm sorry, we'll share data, but there's a cost to obtain this data. And right now, the fact that farmers will be producing more data doesn't mean that they'll get paid better at the end, right? The market still dictates, commodity markets still dictate what's happening in one sector. And that's what influenced the rest of the value chain. So if you're looking at, again, some of the issues that we've looked at, a project that we did with international cooperation with the Swiss cooperation agencies, is to look at the cacao sectors and the various fronts of data that are being asked. So we started looking at the living income, right? So at the end of the day, if you're pushing the farmers to be more productive, is it what comes out of the farm that makes it productive, or everything around that makes it possible for him to get to market at better cost or lower cost, making him more competitive in the context of everything that's being asked. Right? So we look at the infrastructure that are often lacking, but are not considered in the data analysis when you're looking at the farmers, right? From one side, and on the other side, you're looking at the outputs, right? I mean, the ability for the farmers to get access to finance, and now finance is asking, now we want to know more data, not just how financially sustainable you are, but how biodiversity or environmentally friendly you are with the way you're farming your different crops. Right? So we looked at all of this, and now there's also a focus in Colombia or in Latin America on pushing farmers towards digital wallet. And this is where you see the movie app here. So all the transaction, these farmers that are coming down the mountain and with their crops, and they're being asked all kind of information about the way that they grow their crop, but now they're also asking them to provide financial data on their transaction. You also have iFinca here at the bottom that produces data on the price at the farm, so giving more transparency on what campesinos are being paid at the farm at the gate level. So now you have the deforestation data that's coming into the question. And today finally saw something on LinkedIn, and this is what some of the discussion we've had with farmers here is, when you look at biodiversity, I mean, is it a set of data or it's something you hear, right? So I think for the first time today, I was happy to see that on LinkedIn that somebody did a research, and biodiversity is not just a set of data. It's the power of this campesino, the smallholder farmers, to understand biodiversity. It's something that you hear, not just data that you collect at the end, right? So I think what I'm trying to bring to the discussion here, I mean, looking at what Vineet is doing in India and other part of the world, and we're seeing the same push here towards technology or more technology integration, some discussion under interoperability of some of these applications, but right now it's not happening at the country level. There's no discussion on having the right policy, I think, with the G7 or countries in which the products are being exported, right? That this data will be provided, but who's collecting the data? Quite often right now, farmers don't quite understand. I mean, there's a big knowledge gap around data. And what are you giving up? I mean, just recently, there was a group that came and asked some of the farmers to sign off on giving their rights to obtain carbon credits by this organization, saying, we'll collect the information for you, we'll receive the payment, and then we'll report on that information. But so for the farmers right now, I mean, there's no policy that exists. I haven't seen anything in the region anyway that will help farmers not to be overwhelmed, because right now it's either the SMEs. I mean, this is what we're seeing from Canada as well. the Capitalist Coalition. There's a push where the SMEs and the smallholder farmers are the ones that have the information on ESG, on sustainable finance, on green finance, everything else that will make import, export, or financing of the agricultural sector a mandatory disclosure, right? But again, there's no discussion from this side. The Europeans having a great discussion on how they treat data and how they will treat data internally. But it doesn't address the information that will be mined out of countries like Colombia. The country is we're pushing right now, sitting with the new Minister of Agriculture right now to start setting policies. I mean, there's different organization within the country as well that are collecting data. So you've got your Stats Canada-like organization that's collecting data. You've got an agricultural data department that's collecting information, but again, mostly focused on the farm itself, right, and the farmers, but not on what makes agriculture possible or more sustainable at the end of the day. So this is what some of the discussions that I wanted to bring in the perspective of collecting data and the perspective of engaging the farmers. With the cacao sector, and we're really pushing right now having the cooperative or the local association of campesinos. Those that should be the ones collecting data, and they should be compensated for collecting that data. And what will be done with the data at the end of the day, right? And what kind of data and how much data is enough or not enough. So I think in the context of all what's being discussed and the ethical perspective on collecting data from farmers, I think it's important as well from G7 countries or a country like Canada, where really, the impact that is having on the agricultural sector. But Canada is also, like the European Union, a big importer of exotic fruits and agricultural products from around the world. So it's important when you look at data and the type of data, and can that data be compared, right? What you're collecting at the farm level in Canada, what you're collecting in India, and what we're collecting in Colombia. So at the end, if you start looking at comparing some of that data, right? Maybe it doesn't have the same value. It's not the same way you're collecting the information. So I think there's more that needs to be done when it comes to addressing this push or this increasing push from countries to collect data right now in emerging economies more than anything, if you want to reach markets in Canada or in Europe, right? So again, as you can see, it's fairly complex right now. This is only part of the data that's being collected, that we're looking at analyzing the different sources, the costs around collecting that data, and at the end of the day, I think looking at is it having an impact other than just reporting, or for the smallholder farmers, right? The one at the end of the day that will be collecting the data, will be asked for data. But again, without any discussion on will this help them improve the price of their crop? Will this help improve their living income? And at the end of the day, does it serve for sustainability or biodiversity and all these other ESG or transparency mechanisms that are being developed? So I think it's important that on all perspective, from what we're trying to do from Colombia, from South America, and other countries, neighbor countries, is looking at data, but on a more integral or holistic ways as to the cause and because of collecting that data. And again, the burden and the extra burden and the increased burden that will be put on campesinos now, smallholder farmers, to give data, to provide data. But at the end of the day, is it just collecting more data on something that will not help them? Again, as we saw here, campesinos are 40%. If you look at just the cacao sector, 40% of their income is being impacted by climate change. So again, the fact that they're collecting data and saying, no, we'll not do deforestation, this will not compensate, right, for the biodiversity loss or the climate change impact that they're having at the farm level. So I think it's affecting agriculture globally. But again, I think there's a need for, and hopefully this is what will come out of this discussion or many other discussion, a place where we can start looking at what kind of data, and are we moving the needle or just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, and putting extra burden on those that have less time in the day to collect that information, and at the end of the day never receive little of what the information is, of what is being reported. And I just make that parenthesis for the work we've done in Canada with First Nation communities. Again, and when you go in and work with First Nation communities, there's also an agreement that information that will come out of it, and the report that will come out of it, will be shared with the community. So it's not just data mining, but also data sharing and information sharing, which I don't think it's happening as much as it should in the agricultural sectors. So, Gregory, this is a little bit of what I wanted to bring to the discussion, the many fronts of data, the implication, the big question that we need to ask each other from both sides, from a developing country perspective and a developed country perspective, an increasing amount of transparency requirements coming from all sides.
Thank you, Luc. I certainly see some parallels with your presentation and what we're hearing from the agricultural community here in British Columbia, and I'm sure across Canada as well. We've just been doing some engagement, and we keep hearing, don't burden farmers with more sort of data collection and stuff like that. And where do we see the value in that data as a producer? And certainly a lot of concerns on the implications of or the perceived implications of sharing data and what that might either more regulatory oversight or different restrictions that they might incur on that. I think we see a lot of demands from society to be more accountable and agriculture to be more accountable for the environment and making action on climate change, but does that just create more burdens on the producers with little benefit to them and little return monetarily? I'd like to thank our three panelists today for their presentations. I think we should, again, in the matter of time, move on to the Q&A session. We can answer some more questions. So if anybody has more questions, you can add them in the Q&A chat. And I think I'll hand that over to Sarah Louise.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. Luc, could you please stop sharing your screen so that we can see all the lovely faces of the experts here? Thank you. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm a bit hoarse. But really excellent presentations. It was cool to see some connections across the different countries and continents where you're working. We'll ask some of the questions that are, or all of the questions that are in the Q&A, and then some of the questions that were put on the mural board as well. So to start, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but we've had a couple questions from Shmuel Yerushalmi, which I want to acknowledge. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and Shmuel asked to be introduced so that the panelists know where the questions came from. So I'll ask a second question here from them. So this question is for Isabelle. What, according to you, can Israel and other Middle Eastern countries learn from the experience of data governance in the European Union?
Thank you. The experience from the European Union is the starting point is really to whom belongs the data and who is the owner of the data. So starting from this point, then they have the European Union decided that it is providers, so the farmers or the consumers or everybody that are producing the data that are the owner. And based on that, they design their policies so that the privacy can be managed, that data with value can provide rewards to the data provider and so on. So it's, I think, the main element to consider if you want to expand or to think about data governance elsewhere is the first thing is to whom belongs the data and who is the owner. And then the design will be based on the accordance of the legislation and the values that are shared within those countries.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Isabelle. The next question comes from Kirsten Hanam. This question is for any of the speakers, but Vineet asked to have an opportunity to answer it first. So is consent on the use of remotely sensed farm scale data addressed by your work? And if so, how is it managed?
Sure. That was a great question, I think. So we've been involved in one of these sort of use cases in actually with University of California, Davis in US. And the information that we're talking about is satellite information plus AgKit sensor that was collecting this information for research purpose. Now, there are two aspects to consent itself. One is informing the subject that this data is being collected and can be shared. Now, all these remotely sensed information through drones or satellite or some sort of a sensor, I think there's no such consent, the informed consent part. But when you are sharing that information, the second aspect is that at that particular time, you inform the subject that this data can be shared for this particular purpose. Like, I'm collecting this data for creating a research model, or and being used only for that. And when that kind of a consent is there, the enforcement of it becomes important as well. So yeah, short answer. If it is remotely sensed information, it's difficult for the subject to have any say whether this data can be collected or not in the first place. But when that data is shared, it's the onus lies really on the the parties who have collected that information to be compliant and inform that this data can be shared and enforce that particularly.
Thank you, Vineet. Luc, Isabelle, would you like to say anything about the peculiarities of remote sensing data?
Yeah. About where there is data coming from Earth right now, the view from the Earth from satellites. So here, it's most of them are public right now in Europe. But not at a very, very small pixel, because we still have the GRPD, and if we can identify the farm, then it's personal data, so it cannot be shared without the consent of the farmer. So here it's available, it can be used, but if we can identify the farm, then we need the consent of the farmer, because it's personal and it cannot be shared without authorization.
Oh, good question, Sarah. Very interesting. As you probably know, we're close to the equator, so we have the CIAT, the Center for International Tropical Agriculture here. I'm on the board also of a what's called Servir Amazonia, which is a network of global satellite, and that are collecting or helping collect data or developing applications for the agricultural sector in collecting satellite or data from satellite imaging. Right. So right now, in Colombia, there's definitely an increasing amount of people coming in now and trying to get biodiversity credits or carbon credits and coming on farms and asking people to give their data. There's no rules of engagement right now. It's a free for all when it comes to collecting the data, and I think this is one of the things that we're trying to push as well, because people are coming, mostly from Europe right now and saying, okay, well, we have access to these carbon credits. Just let us in your farm or give us permission, without really understanding, right, what's happening with that information. There's no publication. 90% of the money normally stays in the developed countries, doesn't get to farmers when it comes to carbon credits. So again, yes, there's an increasing amount of satellite requests or data, satellite extracting data from satellite imaging. But again, no rules of engagement right now. It's a free for all when it comes to getting to that farm.
Thank you so much. All right, so we have the next question about metadata, or data about data. So Christina Horst asks, when it comes to sharing data, can farmers provide information for how data was collected and or standardized? And any three of the panelists can answer. if no one volunteers, I'll volunteer Vineet, because yeah, I know that you're collecting the data with FarmStack from the farmers. So is there, yeah.
Yeah, so in our case, you know, the farmers really don't know about the internal workings of standardizing or stuff like that. Like data standardization and stuff is something that happens at the back end. What they're interested, and one of the things, you know, in the consent part also, I try to explain, like, they're not interested in knowing all the data fields itself. They are interested in knowing, okay, you're collecting my location information, like lat long or plot boundaries, like what are those details are not that important. But this is the information that you're collecting. This is the information that you want to share. So farmers per se don't have that kind of a say in our applications, but the application, you know, the people who are collecting that, those organizations definitely do have that. And that's where they publish that metadata on the farm stack itself. You know, those farmer organizations who are basically run by a collective of the farmers, like 10 to 20 people, they need to provide that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can add something. Well, in the European Union, it's the data intermediaries that are going to collect the information, and because with that, the farmer cannot, data cannot be shared without the consent of the farmer. So the farmer is going to know where the data has been collected, what kind of data is needed, and what the organizations that ask for this data will do with them. So within the data spaces and through the data service intermediation services, all those information has to be collected, and the data farmer has to know what is going on with the data is shared. So it's important.
Thank you. Luc, anything to add on this question?
There's definitely, I mean, an incredible amount of fintech or application being developed here in Colombia to try to get that information from smallholder farmers. And right now, some of them are asking consent, but it's not a must in Colombia for the moment. I mean, there is a law that says that, you know, you're what you should be doing with the data. So as long as you declare that, you know, you're within the regulation, the country regulation, without giving explanation of what you're doing with the data, then you're fine, right? This is that small buffer note that's put at the bottom. Yes, we comply with the law so much, and that's enough for you to collect information without having consent in Colombia.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question for you all. Is there any concern or evidence that data collection is being leveraged by investors to guide agricultural real estate acquisitions? How are the interests of individual producers or contributors protected? Maybe we'll start with Luc this time.
Boy, I was actually looking at that question. I thought it was very interesting, and I'm sure it is being used by investors or by funds interested in land, in acquiring lands. I'm not too sure there's enough transparency right now in knowing if it's happening or not. But I have no doubt that it's happening. I think, you know, I can relate to an app that was developed by trying to guess the financial numbers from Walmart. So people actually using satellite images to see how many people are walking into Walmart and coming up with bags. And from there, you can start predict, you know, if Walmart's going to be coming up with good data at the end of good financial data. So I think it's most likely happening, but it's the first time I hear about it, but that will definitely opening some ideas here to start looking into this.
Great, thank you. Does this relate to your work, Vineet?
Yeah, I mean, there's no evidence per se, I would say. So we haven't come across this. But yeah, there is this always this concern by the farmers as to what purpose and whom this data is shared. And as soon as you're talking about even the land size, because it affects a lot of subsidies, it affects a lot of other things. So if it is, they want to be sure for what purpose you are asking that information, even if it is about the area of the land or the plot size itself. So if it is about, providing insurance, well and good. If it is providing some other thing, they may not be. So there's definitely concerns at the farmer level, but I don't know about the evidence per se.
And Isabelle, is this something that's protected through the European Union laws, perhaps?
It's a good question. I do not have the answer, but for sure in the European Union, it's more family, a small farm, but it's farmers are not so big, and I don't know how investors are managing land right now, so I do not have the answer to the question.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you so much. And thank you to the participants for asking those hard-hitting questions. We want more. There's another comment in the Q&A from Mark Ruist talking about BurrowNet. So we'll add that into the resources and make sure that the presenters hear about that. But as we close, I want to ask a broader question to all the panelists based on the questions that folks entered on the mural to start. So we've heard a lot about some of the concerns in terms of the burden of collecting the data from Luc, in terms of different literacy rates and making sure that the tools are serving the interests of farmers in India from Vineet, and then very many different kinds of protections that are prioritized in the European Union laws. But I want to know if you have any examples of equitable or ethical data sharing in the work that you've done, or things that you want to highlight in terms of best practices to share with the participants. So just broadly, then the question is, do you have any examples that inspire your work or that you want to highlight for the folks who have joined? And any of the three of you, if you have something that's top of mind, feel free to jump in.
I can start. Well, the data intermediation services that are under development or right now, most of them have created user charts, and with consideration on more ethical issues. So all the participants to those data sharing, they need to provide those recommendation. Right now it's more recommendation, it's good practices, and it's very important because sometimes even someone that is very very nice and don't want to take advantage of some data sets, it can happen. It's not where we are all humans, and sometimes we do not think so much on some issues, and so it's really important to have those kind of code of conduct to be designed in a participative way, where farmers are also involved, and they can also express what they would like to do with their data, how far they would like to go. And so it's really important from my point of view, and it's already implemented in several by several data intermediation services right now.
Yeah, I think personally from my side, I think I relate back to my work in Canada with the Federation, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and also with Indigenous people. But I think I go back to the years where researchers, they finally stopped to saying, farmers are unskilled workers. which, if your heart is beating, then you have a skill. And there's nobody who's unskilled. But it was very hard to convince the agriculture sector to make this move, right? To go into HR sector councils in Canada, to understand that it's important to understand the knowledge that the campesinos or the farmers have in Canada, for example, or globally. So once you recognize this information, collecting that information, then you can help transition to other sectors, or that they get paid eventually, or they can obtain the certification from university or college or technical schools, right? So I think that, that work that we did in Canada with Indigenous communities and with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture on getting this type of data, just HR data, right? I mean, personal data on the farmers so that they get paid well and they deserve to be accredited for the skills that they have. I think it was very interesting, and it's a lot of the background that I'm using here in Colombia to actually help push, better data, but data that not just for research, but that will support the farmers in their quest to have living income. Right?
Thank you. Vineet?
Yeah, I think based on certain pilots and initiatives that we have had, one of the key aspect that we realized is keeping the farmers' interest at the center. If they see a value and they're able to get that value, they are more than interested in being able to provide that consent, and they become the driver of this network rather than the upside down. Typically that we think of, all these organizations are holding that data and can they share it? An example in the chili farmers case that we saw, essentially a farmer was able to, most of the farmers who participated were able to get up to 7 to 15% increase in the price of the produce itself, just because they were able to say that I have this particular yield which is available at this particular, this is particular grade, and this is available, this particular variety. And what it enabled was this particular marketplace actor to be able to connect them. And it creates a win-win kind of a situation. Because for these actors to reach out to these, especially when we are talking about smallholder farmers, to reach out to the farmers, to be able to onboard them, that's the biggest pain point. So, we have to look at the incentives at each and every level, with the overarching, domain of whether or creating those guardrails through technology that the data cannot be misutilized other than the purpose that it is collected for, or it is used for.
Thank you very much. There's another question in the chat, but I want to respect everybody's time. So we'll make sure that the presenters, the experts, get your questions, and then we'll share a report afterwards with the summary for everyone. So Shauna, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to say thank you to all of our presenters, to Vineet, Isabelle, and Luc for taking the time from different parts of the world to join us today and share about your experiences. It's been really helpful and interesting to hear what you're doing in your respective work. And also thank you to Greg for volunteering to moderate for this session. Really great to see the provincial government being engaged on this topic. Great. So, we have not had a chance to get to everybody's questions. And, as we said at the beginning, this session today was the start of the project and of a series, and we're going to be continuing the conversation. So one of the places to continue the conversation is through the mural board. This will be an active collaborative document that we're going to be building over the next 3 sessions. So I'm just going to share that link again in the chat, and you can add any questions that come to you after you log out of the webinar. There, you can also share comments or feedback from today's session. And then you also get a preview of the next sessions. And you could even pre-populate your questions there, and we can let the speakers know what some of the questions are from the participants before the session. So we definitely encourage you to come to the next session. As was mentioned at the beginning, the intent here is to build on each one. So the next one is again on Wednesday morning in 2 weeks. It's going to focus on agricultural data governance in Canada. And we're going to be digging deeper into many of the things that we touched on today. So you are, as a registrant today, you're already automatically registered for that session, and the details will be sent to you. But new registrations are also open. So if you enjoyed today's session and you have colleagues or others in your network who you think would benefit or be interested in this workshop series, then please forward them the information, and they will be able to receive the recording from today before the next session. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is that I wanted to acknowledge that this series and the year-long project is being supported by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council through a Connections grant. And it wouldn't be possible without our advisory committee. So thanks again, everyone, for joining today. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time for the next session.